Yo, what's up, guys? Your buddy Frank Daniels here. Today I have a super important concept or strategy for you that's going to help you get lean, shredded, and downright sexy. Now, before I go into this, I've got a free report. It's called 7 Steps to Shredded. You can download that by, it's probably not going to be a button here because YouTube changed what they're doing, but it's the first link in the description. And for you guys that get to the end of the video, you'll see a button where you can just tap. But if not, first link in the description, 7 Steps to Shredded. Let's talk my concept right here, which is trigger foods versus buffer foods. Now, before I go into that, it's important to understand that in order to lose body fat or get lean, get shredded, okay, you want to get fat off your body, you've got to be in a calorie deficit. So what does that mean? Calories matter. Okay, that's the number one determinant on losing body fat and getting sculpted, right? Calories matter. Within that context, macros matter. So macronutrition matters. So I'll give you an example. You can eat healthy food. You can eat all the healthy food that you want. If you overeat healthy food on a daily basis, you're going to gain weight because you have too many calories. Okay, so they'll cancel each other out. It's not effective. So calories matter. Within that context, macros matter. So I can meet my calorie requirements, come in at that slight calorie deficit, but if I don't have enough protein, my macronutrients aren't balanced, right? My carbs, my fats, that's going to screw up my fat loss and my body composition as well. So calories matter, macros matter. So what am I telling you? Basically, when you're losing body fat, okay, you're trying to get lean and shredded, more often than not, you're probably going to be hungry. And hungry, for most of us, is not really an exciting state to be in. Okay, it can force you to do some pretty crazy things, right? But you have to understand that you're going to be a little bit hungry. Now, that's where this concept right here comes into play: trigger foods versus buffer foods, right? It's important for you to identify exactly what these are for you, okay, and take the appropriate action based on that. But trigger foods are foods that you eat that cause you to get more hungry and eat more. You become like a ravenous dog. You just keep eating, right? Trigger foods, not so great for fat loss. Versus buffer foods, these are foods that you eat and they make you feel full, and you can kind of stop right there. You don't have to eat as much, okay? So typically, trigger foods are higher in sugar, higher in fats. They're typically processed foods that are man-made, sweets, candies, cereals, boxed materials. Not always, okay, but things that are made this way on purpose to keep you hungry and keep you going after that stuff, right? So you buy more of it. Whereas buffer foods are typically lower in sugar, higher in fiber, or high in protein, something of that nature, something that's going to fill you up, keep you satiated or keep you full, right? And make you not want to eat as much. And another example of a buffer food would be water itself. A lot of times, nutritionists will recommend that before you sit down to a meal, you drink a full glass of water, and that in itself kind of fill up your belly and make you not want to eat as much. Once again, you're trying to get lean, not a bad strategy. So I'll give you some examples of trigger foods versus buffer foods for me. So trigger food, something like nuts, almonds, cashews, almond butter. Typically this is healthy stuff, right? Not if you're going to eat an entire bag of cashews or an entire jar of almond butter. And that's what would happen to me. So I had to learn the hard way, right, that these foods are trigger foods for me. Again, are they healthy stuff? Yeah, but if I'm going to overeat them and add a few thousand calories to my diet every day, probably not going to work. So that's a trigger food, something I had to get rid of. Boom, out of the apartment, not going to work, right? Whereas a buffer food, I found for myself, I notice when I eat things like mixed berries, I buy them at Whole Foods. They package them up very nicely for you. I don't like to prepare things. This is simple. I'll get it. Okay, I'll get the mixed berries, simple, prepared for me. Bam, go right to it. When I eat the mixed berries, it tends to fill me up, believe it or not. It may not work for everybody, but for me, it tends to fill me up a little bit more where I don't feel like eating more. So I've identified that, on one side I have a trigger food, and on another side I have a buffer food, right? So where does this come into play? Well, obviously, when you're dieting down, okay, you're trying to lean up, you have to pay attention to stuff that's going to trigger you versus stuff that's going to be a buffer and help you when you're more hungry to not eat as much, because that's what you need in order to be able to get lean, right? So certain people can walk into their office and look in the little the office place where they put the cookies and the donuts, and they can have a cookie, they can have a donut, and have one, and it fits within their macros, fits within their calorie allotment for the day, and they're perfectly fine. Not me, okay? I'm going to eat the whole box of donuts or cookies, okay? It's just not going to work, so I'm not going to have that. That's a trigger food. Whereas, again, you need to identify what the buffer foods are for you, okay? So say you're going out for an evening with your friends, you're going to sit down to dinner, you don't want to have that many calories. What could you have, what fits in there that's going to be able to prevent you from eating as many calories so you can still continue to get lean and create the body that you want. So that's the thing here, guys. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, so things that trigger me may not necessarily trigger you, okay? And things that are buffer for me may not necessarily be a buffer for you. And you really need to identify these things, really sit down and figure out, what do I eat that makes me more hungry, makes me want to eat more, and what do I eat that's relatively healthy, that makes me more full and makes me stop eating on the spot so I can continue to get lean. So it's a super important concept for you guys. You got to watch out for these foods. Make sure you kind of take what I'm telling you. Start to identify these things, okay? Get rid of the trigger foods. Get them out of the house, okay? And bring in more of the buffer foods so you can get lean, okay? Get ripped and get sexy. That's what it's all about, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you really did and you want that 7 steps to shredded free download, you can get that by clicking something around here. Okay, it's going to come up, or it's the first link located in the description below. Guys, my name is Frank Daniels. I hope this video helped you out. If you really enjoyed it, head down below. Of course, leave a comment, and tell us exactly what you want to see next time. Enjoy.